What would happen if we tried to recreate Burzum's Filosofem with modern tools? Well, to borrow a phrase from the man himself, let's find out. Now, Filosofem is probably Varg's most influential album to date, and it's certainly the most commercially successful. Which is ironic because Varg himself has said that Filosofem was intentionally crafted to be an anti-black metal album. When I recorded this, I was fed up with the whole black metal concept. The MSM had turned it all into a twisted parody of what it was intended to be, with good help from a bunch of hang-around bands. So I wanted to distance myself from it as much as I could. In fact, Filosofem was intended to be an anti-black metal album. Instead of faster tempos, Varg went the other way. Long, hypnotic riffs that repeated almost endlessly in songs. Also, there were the inclusion of synths, but not just synths, entire synth tracks that had the same hypnotic, endless repetition. But behind the intentional lo-fi aesthetic of the album, there are a few interesting and surprising recording tricks. You see, even in 1993, there were tons of studio tricks for recording, tons of them. And one of them was looping, which is something that Varg took advantage of. While recording the double bass for Jesus Todd, Varg did not like the sound of having a double pedal on the single bass drum. So we decided to solve this problem by creating a loop instead. I played the bass drum with my right foot only for some time, and Peyton then copied this and added it to what I had already played, but with a delay. So it sounded as if I had played two bass drums. Well, how about that, eh? Additionally, Dunkelheit had already been recorded, but for Filosofem, Varg opted to re-record it again, this time using a click track, because Varg did not like the results of the earlier recording. So yes, there you go. One of the biggest, most iconic lo-fi albums ever recorded was done with the help of some studio magic back in the day, and Varg also re-recorded an entire song just because it didn't meet his standard. Go figure. Now the guitar tone on this album is also very unique, to say the least. With the exception of the 10-watt Marshall used for one of the guitars on the debut album, I used my 60-watt PV for all of the other albums up and until I recorded Filosofem. For the latter, I used my brother's stereo as a guitar amp to get that special sound. Now, another interesting thing to note is, when you look at guitar tablature online, it generally says that we're meant to play Burzum songs in standard E or E-flat tuning, but it just never seemed to sound right. Note, though, that I did not intentionally try to not tune the guitar quote-unquote correctly. I just left it to chance. And sometimes I decided it was too off, normally too down-tuned, and I adjusted it until it was fine again. Not correct, but fine. Well, that certainly explains quite a few things about the guitar tone and the guitars in general with Burzum. And even with the deliberately lo-fi aesthetic, the mix and the album itself still shows that fundamental mixing and basic principles have been followed. The drums clearly have compression on them. You can hear the bass, you can hear the guitars, you can hear the vocals, and you can hear the synths. And they all live in their respectable positions so that you can hear everything. The point being that, yes, it's raw, but it's actually still a cohesive listening experience. Which I guess is part of the irony here, because Varg set out to create an anti-black metal album just for Filosofem to become like one of the most influential black metal albums ever created. So with all that said, could we try to recreate Dunkelheit with modern tools, but keeping the idea of raw minimalism intact, but have it be like a smidge more listenable and not as harsh? That's exactly what I set out to do. For the guitars, I used my second wave black metal presets for Neural DSP Nolly X because I built them specifically to capture a raw, gnarly character, but still with a clarity that keeps things listenable. Now for the drums, I opened up Superior Drummer 3, just the core library, and I just created a pretty standard, not flashy, not over-the-top drum set and processed it just enough where it has that nice atmospheric black metal feel, but again, sounds pretty good. So think of it as a modern twist, right? We have the raw, minimalist, atmospheric idea of Filosofem, but with, you know, like a modern attitude. So it doesn't sound like it was recorded with a completely broken Walkman. And if you don't know what a Walkman is, I'm sure you'll Google it and you'll enjoy learning about what a Walkman was. So here's what my recreation of Dunkelheit sounds like. Now, in creating this video, something happened that I took notice of. I was intentionally trying to do something. I was creating sounds for a purpose. I had a vision of what I wanted and where I wanted to go. And every decision that Varg made, for example, the hypnotic minimalist guitar riffs that repeated over and over again, played with a stereo from his brother. It was all done with a deliberate intention, which I think is really missing from a lot of music these days. Filosofem is good because the songs are good. Now, it just so happens that Varg made every decision possible to make it lo-fi, but the songs are still really good. And that's why, even 30 years later, we still talk about this album. It's not because of the raw, shitty production. But I'd like to leave you with one last quote that I find interesting. Also, in spite of me doing things my own way and seeking originality, a lot of what I did was perfectly unoriginal, heavily inspired by others, and pretty classic for the metal genre. And I am perfectly fine with that. I am here to speak about what I did, about my motives and goals, and not to pretend. So in essence, it's what I always talk about here when I show you guys how to mix. You have to have goals, intention, and a vision of what you're trying to do and where you want your mix to go. In my opinion, it's pretty clear that you can use modern tools to create lo-fi, raw, minimalistic style compositions. They can sound good, they can sound unique, they don't have to sound like garbage, but the caveat here, the very big caveat here, is that your songs just have to be very good. And with that, the important aspect of this is intention. That's why I create presets like the second wave black metal, so that you guys can move towards an intention that you have. Here is the sound that you're trying to work with. You're going to change your guitar tone later, but fine, but at least you have a sound that you can write music with, that it moves towards the direction that you want to go into. And if you like the drum sound in this recreation, I decided to put the Dunkel kit on my website, even though I wasn't really planning on doing that or doing anything with the kit. But after hearing the results and just how nice it sounds, I thought you guys might find it useful as well. So I put that on the website. And actually, you can find links to both of these resources in the description below. So whether you love or hate Burzum, you really can't argue the fact that Filosofem changed black metal forever, even though Varg went out of his way to make an anti-black metal album. And before I go, I can't not say this. Being raw does not automatically mean you wrote a great black metal song. It worked with Varg over 30 years ago because of the recording technology at the time and the way things were done at the time, but there was a lot of intentionality built into Varg's thought process and songwriting process. And at the end of the day, Varg had good songs. Too many one-man bands today use raw production as a way to cover the weak songwriting and the weak songs. Instead, focus on being intentional with your songwriting. Use the tools that you have. If you don't want to have a polished black metal song, that's fine, but you still need to be able to know how to use your tools to get the results that you're looking for, be that raw black metal or polished black metal. At the end of the day, just write an awesome song. How about that one, okay? Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And by the way, if you're curious how I fixed the guitars on Niall's Iffy Phallic album, you can watch that video right here.